Yo, Nakama, how is it going? It is your boy Cozy coming at you with our first iteration of the beginner's guide to the One Piece card game starting in OP16. Of course, this is going to be an ever-going series where we teach you the concepts of the game, teaching you mechanics, a little bit of everything to help you become a better player in the One Piece card game. So let's go ahead and start with our first episode of the card overview and some of the basic things when it comes to the card game. So let's hop in the classroom and I'll catch you there in a minute. Peace and love, y'all. First up are the card types. So every card in the One Piece card game is one of 5 types. So let's get into each one. First up is our leader card. So your leader card is the heart and soul of your deck, the captain of your deck. It's going to sit in the center of the field. It never leaves the battlefield. It can't be played, and it can't be removed by other cards. It has a power level, an effect, and it determines what colors your deck can play based upon the leader itself. So think of it just like the main character, and everything in your deck is built around this specific card. Next up, we're going to look at character cards. So character cards make up the bulk of your deck. These are essentially your crew members of the deck. They're villains, allies, whatever the case is, you're going to need to play them on the field to attack and defend. So each one has a cost to play, a power number showing their offensive or defensive capabilities. Sometimes they have an effect, and sometimes they also have a counter, which sits on the far left corner of, or left side of the card. Now, you can constantly play characters as long as you have the resources to do so, but ultimately it comes down to what characters you have in hand and what decisions you'll be making as we explore further in this series. Next up are the event cards of the One Piece card game. So event cards are one-time use, and when you play them, the effect goes off, and then they go to the trash. If you played any other card games, think of them like spells or instants. They can draw cards, they can boost power, remove characters, do setup combos. They're just really versatile. And they tend to have some of the most powerful effects in the game. And you can also see how much it's going to cost you to do so at looking at the same spot as every other character card for their cost, and at the bottom of the card for their effect. Stage cards are built a little bit different. So instead of a one-time effect like events, a stage sits on the field and gives you a continuous ongoing effect for as long as it is out there, and they usually are less common to play depending on the type of deck you are playing. But when they're relevant, they can completely shape how a game plays out. You can see each of these individual cards have a distinct border type, with the character cards usually being on a white border or maybe a fancy silver lined border. You have event cards in the yellow, and then you have stage cards in the blue border. And last, and definitely one that is unique to One Piece, is Dawn cards. Now, the concept of Dawn is not new to any TCG, but Dawn cards are the resource system that we use in the game. So for every turn, you add 2 Dawn cards to your pool up to 10, and you can spend them to play cards, activate effects, buff your leader, buff your characters, a little bit of everything. So this is why it's interesting, because of the attaching Dawn system that we have in the game. That's how you buff your leader and buff your character for the turn. So every turn you're making a real decision of either spending Dawn to play something or attach your Dawn to power up something on your field. That kind of tension is one of the coolest parts of the game. So a quick card reading tip before we move on to the next step is whenever you see a card you don't recognize, check 3 things in this order: the cost in the top corner, the power of the character, and then each text in the middle, whether it's the effect or certain keywords, and check if it has counter. Which brings us to the overarching and very complicated portion of One Piece, is understanding the keywords of each card. Now, this is a big section. Keywords are the words printed on cards that trigger specific rules. Once you know these, reading any card becomes way faster and way easier. We're going to go through all of them. Simple ones, super quick, complex ones with a little bit more detail so you actually understand how to use them. So first, we're going to be looking at rush. Rush is a keyword that says that a character with rush can attack on the same turn you play it. Normally, characters do not have this effect. Now, if you're trying to close out a game or apply immediate pressure, rush characters skip that waiting period and attack right away, which is great for finishing moves or building tempo. The next one we're going to look at is double attack. So when a card with double attack deals damage to your opponent's leader, it deals 2 life instead of 1. Now, keep in mind, if your opponent only has 1 life, it doesn't deal double damage. They just take 2 life cards from their pile. Banish is another keyword that deals damage to your opponent. However, that damage card does not go to their hand. It goes straight into the trash, not activating any trigger abilities that come from life. Unblockable is a character that cannot be blocked by a blocker, essentially. So your opponent can't activate blocker to intercept the attack. They have to use counter from their hand, whether it's an event or characters in their hand, in order to prevent a attack from dealing damage to their life. Which leads us into what a blocker actually is. So when one of your other cards is being attacked, you can rest a character with blocker to intercept that attack and target that character instead. I know we touched base a little bit on triggers when talking about Banish. So exactly what is a trigger? So when you take damage and reveal a life card that has a trigger keyword at the bottom of the card, you can activate the card's trigger effect right then and there, instead of just adding it to your hand. Now, there's a whole concept of when and when not to activate triggers, which we'll get into in the series, but just a basic understanding of you see a trigger in life, you want to use it, go ahead and reveal it, do the trigger effect, and that card goes from your life to your trash. Next up is counter. So some events have the counter effect on their card. So a counter is a keyword on event cards that can only be played during your opponent's counter step. So when your opponent is attacking into you and you see a card with counter in your hand, you can use it during the counter step of combat to play out the effect. Now, keep in mind, some events do require Dawn to play the counter event. So that is just something to be mindful of when doing your Dawn math to make sure that you have the right cards to play out. Moving into like the timing and activation type of keywords, you have ones that say on play. This effect activates the moment the card is put onto the field. So once you play a character with an on-play effect, you activate that on-play effect instantly, and then you resolve the effect, and then you can go forward. When attacking applies when a character is in the middle of declaring their attack to a leader or a character. This effect activates when the card declares the attack during the attack step. And so once you put the character sideways to declare your attack, you use that when attacking effect. Activate main is an effect that can be activated at any point during your main phase of your turn. So as long as you're currently not in a battle or you're not in the middle of drawing a card at the start of your turn, every single part of your game is a main turn effect viable. So the difference between activate main and main is only found on event cards. So this means that events can only be played during the main phase outside of battle. So if it doesn't have a counter and it only says main, you can only play it on your turn. End of turn is an effect that starts at the very end of your turn during the end phase of the One Piece card game. Basically, what will happen is when you say, I'm going to the end of my turn, you can activate any of your end of your turn effects. Conversely, there is an end of your opponent's turn effect. It's the same concept, but instead of it being on the end of your turn, it's on the end of your opponent's turn. There are cards that say your turn, so it's a condition that is met while it is currently your turn. Opponent's turn, same thing, just instead of yours, it's their turn. On your opponent's attack is another keyword that exists in the One Piece card game. This effect activates when your opponent declares an attack after their when attacking effects resolve because they are turn player. On block is the effect that activates during the blocker step of the battle phase. So if a blocker has an on block effect, you would declare your blocker to rest them, and then you would use their on block effect. On KO is another effect that when a character is KO'd, either in battle or by card effect, they get to activate their ability. And then once per turn is an effect that can only activate once per turn on that character. Looking at the resource keywords, there is a Dawn, times, and then a number. So usually what that means is a condition that is met when there is that number of Dawn cards under that character or leader in order for them to use their effect. On the other side of adding Dawn to a character, there's Dawn minus effects where you remove Dawn from your cost area to your Dawn deck again in order to activate the effect. So to use it, you would just return however many Dawn it is requiring you to do it, to put from the field back to the Dawn deck, and then you get to use the effect. Some other important things to realize is there are certain keywords that say KO, which means that the character is sent to trash either from losing a battle or from a card effect that says KO. But there is another keyword that says trash. So it's an instruction to take a card from your field and put it in trash or move it from hand to trash directly. A really good example of this is the Ben Beckman that came from OP09. It says trash a character with 6,000 power or more, or base 6,000 power or less. And essentially, instead of doing the on KO effect, it's being trashed, so it does not activate the on KO effect. And then a new keyword that just came out with the Roanora Zoro is a really good example of it. It's been very popular in the meta, is Rush Character. Now, this is a variant of Rush, and if this character can attack opponent's characters on the turn it's played, but not the opponent's leader. So looking at Zoro as an example, there is a certain requirement for him to have this, but if that requirement is met, he can attack any rested character your opponent controls the same turn that he's played. And that's going to be pretty much the entire breakdown of what a One Piece card looks like, and for every keyword in the One Piece card game and exactly what they mean. So let's do a super fast recap by category. For attack keywords, we went over rush, rush character, double attack, unblockable. For defensive keywords, we went over blocker to intercept attacks aimed at other cards, triggers to fire free effects from our life pile when we take the damage, counter events to boost power during an opponent's attack or do other shifty things. Timing keywords tell you when effects go off. So for on play, it fires when the card is played. When attacking, fires when you declare an attack. Activate main happens at any time during your turn, when you're not in combat. Main effects are only played on your turn from events. End of your turn and end of your opponent's turn happens at the very end of that turn. Your turn and opponent's turn applies to the entire turn step. On your opponent's attack, it reacts to your opponent's swing. On block, triggers when you use a blocker. On KO, fires when a character dies in battle or by effect. We went over resource keywords for Dawn times X is a condition where enough Dawn is attached to a character for the effect. Dawn minus X is a cost where you return Dawn from your field to the Dawn deck to activate the effect. And KO specifically applies to battle or removal effect. Trashing is a circumvent around that removes a card from field or hand to the trash pile. So I know it's been a lot, and don't try to memorize all of it right now. Bookmark this video. Come back to it whenever you see a keyword on a card you don't recognize, and that's basically what it's here for. On the next episode, we're going to walk through an actual turn and looking at what the battlefield looks like so you can understand not only what the cards are from this episode, but how are they applied in a real-life setting in episode 2. If this helped you out, make sure you drop a like because it genuinely goes a long way for this channel. Subscribe if you haven't yet, so that way you don't miss the next episode of the series. Make sure you ring that notification bell, and I'll make sure I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace and love, y'all.
Thanks for riding with the vibe. Cozy games every time.